Welcome to the SPL Rundown, your weekly look at all the SPL action. I'm your host, Apam, joined by Lermy Wermy and Frost, and this week we have a special guest, Hinduman of the casting squad, joins us here to break down the last week of Phase 2. The jungler for SSG, Cherryo, joins me a little bit later on to talk about everything that's happened so far this season, so be sure to stick around for that. But let's dive right into Week 14 and talk about Renegades versus United. I think this, everyone will agree, was the most important set of the weekend. Basically, whoever won this set was going to get 6th place and make the playoffs, the Phase 2 playoffs. I'm just going to start by saying, what is Barrow smoking? He picked Scotty and Apollo. I think he's just trying to, maybe get all the gods played. But, very interesting picks this game. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
A combination of a meme, because Apollo, Scotty, Apwash, that were the only ones that weren't played yet. So it's like, okay, I'm going to play them now. But why now, Barrow? Why when this is the most important game for you?
Yep.
But you choose to do that now. And not only that, I almost take this personally. I've been on him for 3 years to build Bloodforge, and now he goes for it. We've got Twitter discussions back and forth where he's like, no, you're stupid. You don't compare item for item. You go build for build and this and that. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, Bloodforge is the way to go. So I just say, is he legit? Is he memeing? It's like, it's a fine line where he finally relaxes and just kind of goes with it. And then the results just come through for him. It worked. That's all that matters, I suppose. It worked.
I do think that's all that matters.
Frost is right. Like, at the end of the day, as long as you get the W, no one cares. Like, you can pick these weird picks that everyone's like, oh, this isn't meta at the moment. But as soon as it gets a win, all of a sudden, it can be viable or now first ban for some reason.
Sure.
Like, we've seen that go through the metas before. Like, not surprised at all. I am surprised, though, like you said, that he did it on the games that mattered the most to him. You know what I mean? Like, against this United squad. But the fact they both worked out great was technically good for the game, I guess, in one sense. And, Renegades are kind of destroyed that day, I would say.
I think they did as well.
It's kind of crazy, too, because we, in our last episode, not a single one of us voted for Renegades at all. We thought it would be, a 2-0 wash the entire time for United, and just to see, like you said, I don't know what juice they were all on. The Jets, they were there. They were turned on, dude. I don't know what happened with this squad, but it seemed to click. I feel like they all just kind of did their stuff, and it worked out that day.
I'm sure it must help that Scotty is like a comfort pick for Barra as well. He definitely loved playing Scotty no matter what. So
because the ice, he loves the ice, and you know who designed the despicable ability? Yeah, we've got him right here.
Right, listen, right. I just need to clear this up. Right, yes, I came up with the idea of the ice field. Okay, in the original iteration, when they were talking about Scotty design, they're like, we kind of want some abilities to focus on, the frost and the cold, because we're going to have the pet involved and things. And I was like, it'd be really cool, guys, if we had a Muzenkarb honey that you could draw it just like the AMC ability, but it would be an ice field, yeah? And you can create a giant slip and slide. And that turned into the big discussion about how we could get the tech to potentially work to make that slide happen. And then they were like, okay, cool. And I didn't know about that they were putting it in the game. It was just a suggestion. And they came in the game and they added damage to it, which I never suggested. It was just supposed to be a weird CC. And not only that, then they added the ping pong effect to it as well, which I thought was ludicrous. I'm like, okay, that's too much, especially because you can ping pong and die into a wall over and over again. But yeah, I had some involvement, but not all involvement in that Billy, okay? The CC is me. The damage is not me. That's what I'm going to say now.
Sure. I do want to get your guys' opinion on where you see this Renegades team ending up in playoffs, or maybe even looking forward to Worlds a little bit. Do you think that this win and maybe going to playoffs, this is a way for them to build some momentum? And is that something that they can do even at playoffs?
I'd like to think so. Even in the Reddit, everyone was clamoring, this is the Barracuda I've been wanting to see. If Renegades had just been doing this all year, of course, Renegades is so stupid that it took them this long to figure it out, to just play what's fun. No, I think it was just a big, huge bolster in their confidence, who they were going against. It was more of a personal thing for them than an actual overall momentum. I think they're well aware that they kind of were the better team here. At least they weren't the underdogs this time around.
Right.
I don't know how that's going to fare for them in the playoffs. I don't think it's really much gas in the tank for them.
Yeah, when I look at the playoffs and I look at Renegades, if I'm honest, I mean, their Phase 2 this year, they haven't taken a... They didn't win against PK, they didn't win against SSG at all, or Sanguine. So there's 3 teams, the top 3 teams, that destroyed them during the phase. They didn't look close for the most part. There was 1 or 2 games. But then again, well, Ghost, they did take a set off Ghost. They've taken sets off Radiance this split. There is signs there, right? And I think that's the only thing you can really look at. Because when you look at the series standings for the split, Renegade 6 and 15, the next closest one up, which is PK, is 12 and 9. So like there's a double amount of win jump in terms of where Renegades needs to be. Can they do it on a given weekend? Yes, that's the big key there. I think they've still got a shot to get to a semi-final, maybe get themselves some more points and maybe sneak somewhere. But realistically, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, and the best thing they can really do is get as much experience trying to rush for the worlds, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them because even in their second game in the United set, like United knew exactly what Renegades wanted to play. They just couldn't come in with the game plan to deal with it. So now that people know, oh, Ratatoskr is the last one trick or kind of like that. I mean, like he still did well in the second game, but I feel like if they're able to target out this jungler, that's going to be a huge part of the momentum that gets slowed down. And I feel like, they take away the Guan Yu for variety, Tier for both variety and Jake. I mean, they can work with that. They know exactly what the strategy is. It's just all about being able to control the wild card of the duo because, I don't think really anyone knew what was going to happen there with a Scotty Tier duo lane when they locked that in the first time. But if they come in a little bit prepared and Renegades don't have anything new up their sleeves, I mean, they'll probably struggle.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next set of the week. PK versus Obey. And we could have mentioned the Apollo for the last set, but we have to mention the Zapollo in this set, right? Zap I think looked really great on the Apollo in game 1, 8 and 4. Did he play game 2 as well?
No, I don't think he did.
I think he played Rama in game 2. But still, we see Apollo, which had not been seen in the SPL yet as well, I believe, from both Bera and Zap. What does Apollo bring to the table that, and why are we seeing him right now instead of earlier?
Nostalgia. These are the two veteran hunters that'll be sitting in their rocking chairs. Do you remember Apollo? And he used to run the meta. That's pretty much what it brings to these two. I think it was mostly picked for one, the memes because he hadn't been played yet, sentimental reasons, and it's not like it was going to do anything for seeding. He did feed his brains out on it. That's classic Zap to me. When he really doesn't care too much, you can tell.
Where he's diving in, trying to make the play happen, and doesn't care. Yup. That is, I mean, yeah, the whole Apollo thing. I mean, the Apollo game that he played against Obey. I mean, he went 8 and 4 in that one. It wasn't too bad. I think the biggest, it was the other day as well where we saw the Apollo. I think that one of the reasons we've seen a little bit more Apollo, is mainly because of the tweet that I put out about making sure every god got picked. Sure. And I jokingly said their world's placement would increase this year. So I think that's why both Zap and Barra went straight to them to try and get some of that juice.
I gotcha.
Good script.
It did. I thought that, but then I'm like, well, I'm joking. Please, I'm going to get angry fans soon after when I put that out. But secondly, sometimes I think there's a lot of gods that end up being sleeper because they just don't get thought about for a minute or two, too. And then when you mention them, you're like, well, maybe I give it a go. I think what Apollo brings to the table, if you think about recently, the biggest change for him was the moves, which was just a slight animation change, which does make it a little bit more effective and a little bit better to play around with. But more than anything else, it's something that only really Chernobog brings to the table, which is some sort of global rotation. Right. But in his case, it's more global vision and rotation too. Split push availability. Like, I think Apollo's always going to have a small place, but it always depends on what the meta's at too. How can you pick an Apollo when a Cupid's in the meta, for example? You can't. So unless Cupid's away, and that's one of the things that I think some fans at home don't always recognize, is that the picks and bans of a meta and some gods being strong require other gods to be weak in that case. So if Cupid's in the meta, it's very rare that you're going to see Apollo. It's very rare that you're going to see a Jabulonke. You know why? Because Cupid does really well against those.
It is such a nice change for them to increase the duration, or rather decrease the duration of the moves, because really that was his big engage tool. And especially if you're trying to be aggressive in lane, which against a Rom it's become a little bit harder to do, but at the same time, this is Zatman we're talking about. He always goes in, always tries to put the moves on the enemy, and actually it's a super good strategy too, because you can instigate your passive if you dash to the wave. So the fact you do that even faster now, and if Zap doesn't miss, which sometimes it can be a little questionable, but when he doesn't, he's kind of on point. And like you said, it wasn't great at the beginning there. He kind of might have hinted a couple of times, but once he was getting into the team fight stage, it was kind of hard. And we talked about this last week too. Obey has one strategy.
Mhm.
If anyone can work around that strategy, they kind of just fall over, and that's moderately what happened this time. There were a couple of switch ups here and there with their comps, but it's just kind of all the same, I feel like.
Yeah, speaking of Obey strategy, they're still going sort of all in on this burn objectives, don't worry about team fights strategy, kind of. Which I guess seems to work, but the ISIS has not really, seen the best days in this strategy for sure.
That's technically how you win the game, It's about getting the Titan and all that. That's I think it's just so time sensitive. Yeah, that kind of play style only works if you can get it done within like 24 minutes or something like that. Take a lead, snowball with it, and start just taking objectives around people. If you don't do that, let's say that you are sieging like my Titan. If you wipe 34 minutes into the game, that's like 50-second timers. We're just want to walk down and take yours. It has a very specific moment where it can shine, and if you don't hit it there, you're not going to hit it at all.
I think the one thing to really look at them with that team too is they were both struggling in objectives and they were struggling in team fights once upon a time. And like if you in the bigger picture, you've got to think of baby steps is kind of how I look at it. And so taking one of those things off the table and go, okay, let's get really good at objectives. You can only improve one thing at a time. If they can get the objectives down and then start to improve on the team fight in aspect, it's easier. I mean, if you're getting good at your objectives anyway, your gold differential is going to make it easier for those team fights. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's not an easy task though, and I know they've had an uphill battle. And they've had a battle all year, if I'm honest. But at the same time, like it's good to see some improvements and what their goals are. You know what I mean? Even the fans, even you guys, everyone can identify what their strategy is.
Right.
And even if it doesn't work, at least you can see the method to their madness.
Yeah, I don't know that it doesn't work. I just think it might be a little bit one-dimensional.
That's the big key. Yeah, it does work, but yeah, it is one-dimensional. Yeah,
and I think that's also a bit of the point. Like to your credit there, Hindu, you said neither the team fights or the objective fights were working out well. Early on in phase 1 and even early on in phase 2. So the fact that they're able to say like, hey, we can focus on this and potentially, win games, win sets, learn things about our team fight from just focusing solely on doing objectives and things like that, to at least put us in a position where we can maybe have some even fights, to learn about what we can do in these sort of chaotic environments. Because I think the objective fights are a little more designed and choreographed, I think, than just some of these team fights that happen naturally in jungle corridors and things like that.
Exactly. And I think that's a big key with Obey there, is that when you look at that team and what they've gone through with Sino joining the team and things, they've really been looking for whether, to an extent, in my view, without hearing their comms, it feels like the leadership. You know what I mean? Like there's no one really shot calling in team fights, but it's very easy to have someone shot call and go, let's go Gold Fury, and everyone to raise their hand and go, hey, let's do Gold Fury.
Oh, yeah, that'll be
when it gets to a team fight situation, it's so chaotic and the leadership may be lost there, or people's direction isn't as focused. It's hard to micromanage on the comms to an extent of what's going on there compared to an objective which is more static. So it makes a lot of sense to me to get better at the objectives first, get those under control and go, okay, how do we push on from there? If we can't team fight still, maybe we look for pick comps. We're going to get a pick, go for an objective, get a pick, go for an objective, and then keep the map split up and stop the enemy team. But then you've also run the risk of, again, it being one-dimensional, like you were saying, which is everyone knows you're going to do that every time, so they don't get themselves picked.
And I think it's actually kind of especially hard to, like you say, like work the kinks out in such a methodical manner in what I think most people consider is quite a heavy dive meta too, because, there's just no room for your carries to breathe most of the time if the other team is really diving them well.
I think they chose the wrong team to practice this against. To me, the Knights are, the way that they play objectives is probably like the most aggressive, the most punishing. These are the guys that will drop a fire giant at like 200 health just to fight you. If they know that you wasted this, and this on a Gold Fury, they're going to go in on you. Yeah, Ghosts do that as well. But if they had been doing this against, say, like a Sanguine and Renegades, they don't really punish after the fact. It's sort of, okay, it's gone. Let's go back to our lanes. Let's do whatever. But PK, what's missing? All right, let's go in. They used Isis Soul. All right, let's go in.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next set of the week, which was Ghost versus Radiance. I think Radiance, held their own, especially in game one. First blood, I'm reading here, wasn't until 11 minutes into the game, and it was kind of a slow pace with Radiance, taking the lead in gold sometimes, but, Ghost were able to fight back into it, win some late game team fights, and actually they 2-0 this set. I think it was back and forth in both of the games, but Ghosts are able to hold on to win this. I don't think there is too much really to say here. I think both these teams might have been basically locked in their positions as far as playoff goes. Is that correct?
I would, yeah. Their seeding was pretty locked, but I would almost say to the contrary that there's not bad blood, but there is the tension between these two. Radiance comes in looking unbeatable. Ghost are the first ones to stop them. Then Ghost are the hot boys. They kind of self-destruct in a way, but Radiance also puts them in their place. It comes down to the top three: Ghost, Radiance, SSG. SSG has shown that they can't really hold a candle to Ghost. If Radiance can't do anything, Ghost takes the entire league for free. So honestly, they're not just playing for themselves; they're playing for the rest of the league, showing that Ghost don't get to just run away with it. But it's shown at first playoffs, and that every matchup, aside from the one where they were self-destructing, Radiance kind of does fall flat in the end. But they tend to be really close; like they're just right there, and right at the end is where he gets taken from them.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the total kills for the set, and it was 28 kills for Ghost and 25 for Radiant. So it really was quite an even matchup back and forth. Sorry for cutting you off there, Hindu.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just going to follow what Frost was saying, because I completely agree. I mean, if you think about the Pro League this year, Radiance and Ghost were the two teams that everyone was like, oh, yes. Like, sure, you had PK, they just won Worlds, right? But they've got a roster change, and they lost Sam, so how would they be? You also have, the Renegades, the SSG, who was former Renegades. But yeah, the SSG squad, they come back again, underperform. But the big two that everyone was looking at was Ghost at the start of the year and Radiance at the start of the year, because Radiance was seen as the super team in quotation marks, as everyone calls it. But at the same time, they've struggled, and I think Ghost, they're always going to be close matches between those two, in my opinion. Like, even if they do go one way or another, which, let's be honest, Ghosts have had a much better time of it up against Radiance than Radiance the other way around. But I think Radiance has just, in fairness, Radiance has struggled since halfway through this split, in my opinion. I think they've really been starting to gather ground again, but I think that would just be a real stumbling block that Ghost gave them this week. Even though it was like not that important, honestly, overall, it still was something that both teams really would have vied for. And I think what Frost was saying is exactly right. Like, these two have a bit of an animosity just because they were both seen as the top two coming into the start of the year. It's a big game for both of them.
Oh, just how you've got a Roar, you've got PBM, that are known as the W key tanks, just full on run you down, but that just was slow going.
Yeah,
very uncharacteristic of either Ghost or Radiance, and it was just tension from it. But I think even more uncharacteristic from Ghost, seeing as we have talked to Slaney, we have talked to a lot of the players where they think that they know how to play Smite as it's supposed to be played. They think that the others played a little bit slower, but they're just not quite there yet. This is Ghost not slowing down as in like showing their age or getting tired out, but almost as if they've found some form of humility in a way, like that bullheadedness is kind of gone, and they're going, yeah, our way is more fun, but playing like this almost guarantees us the wins.
Yeah, early game, like when you get that tension that Frost is talking about, right, in those first 10 minutes, it normally means something's on the line. And for Radiance, I feel like there was a big point of like Ghost didn't want to make a misstep, because if you're honest, Ghost has made some missteps this phase. They've done a lot of issues in their late game with throwing games by having too much fun or allowing teams back into games that should have been over. Whereas, against Radiance, it's kind of a tip of the hat to both teams of like, we'll give you respect in the early game. If you're not going to make a mistake, we're not going to try and punish you for it, because there's no mistake to be punished. So it becomes a bit of a back and forth, and those games are always interesting as a caster, like from an analyst point of view, because you're like, okay, we've got no first blood. It's either gonna pop off as soon as that first kill happens, and it's a bloodbath until the end of the game, and we're done in 25 minutes, or we're going to 90 minutes here, and that's either way. You just don't know at any given moment.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat of like that school of thought, right? These two teams coming at each other I mean, they have to be calculated and respectful, which we didn't really see that previously. I feel like, as mentioned, they've made mistakes before where they haven't given as much respect, and they're kind of learning from that. They're saying, okay, whenever the door is open, we'll take it, but we're not going to try and force the door open. We're going to really be calculated, and then that's where the ghost troll comes through. And once they open the door, they kind of all pile in, right? They just take every advantage they can. And Radiance this time just didn't really super have an answer to it. I feel like their comps were also kind of weird. Like, we haven't really talked about that at all, but we're seeing like Kabrakan come back out. I mean, like,
Sure.
he's a cool character for sure, and Set's been all over the place too. Like, that character is nuts on another level, it seems.
This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with the jungler for Space Station Gaming, Cherryo, to talk about Phase 1 and Phase 2, and look ahead towards playoffs, worlds, and maybe the future as well. Check it out. Hey guys, I'm here with Cherryo, the jungler for SSG. We're here to talk about Phase 2, Phase 1, maybe look towards worlds a little bit, and also talk about Cherryo's long and illustrious SPL and Smite career. So let's start with Phase 2, and I think we basically have to start with this sort of last set that you guys have played. I know when we talked about it with the analysts, we considered it basically like an exhibition set because you guys had role swapped everything. Can you talk a little bit about the role swap and where it came from? I know in some of the Smite Pro YouTube content, you guys had talked about this sort of being your ideal fit for role swapping.
Yeah, we kind of just wanted to try and have a little bit of fun in the last set, really, more than anything. Like, we had like two ideas. Either we just troll pick in our roles, you pick unconventional picks, or we just role swap, and we kind of felt like role swapping could be a little bit more fun. So we just thought we should do it, and the roles just kind of fit themselves, like with the way we play.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really expect Raffer to do anything other than play mid. And
Yeah,
you gave him the Discordia
role.
just to get that passive up, right?
Yeah, it is one of his main gods as well, so Discord and Thoth.
Sure. I do have to ask about the Alpwash. I think this is the only time we've seen Alpwash in the solo lane. Was this just to get the blessing of the gambler, Hinduman, who said, if all the gods are played, you guys are gonna, get the script in your favor?
Pretty much so. The Hinduman tweet, and we're like, maybe it's true. Maybe let's just get him out of the way. Maybe we'll get a little something back in return in the script this year or next year.
Sure.
And also, it was like, I mean, who cares, right? We know he's not the best god, but like, if we could pick him and make sure like people who want to see Push played, then we'll do it.
Yeah. Do you sort of expect to get camped that game? Especially with them sort of knowing.
I did not expect to get. I expected to get camped, but not that early. Like, I got ganked before Scream even had full boots. He had boots too, and then he was ganking. And usually it's a bit early.
Yeah.
So like I haven't even placed my wards yet. Like, I bought 2 wards, I think, but I haven't placed them yet, and ended up dying before I placed them. So it's
unfortunate.
Unlucky.
Yeah, unlucky on the Alpwash. What is can you talk a little bit more about this set? Did you guys was there anything interesting going on in the comms and things like that? Was there some fun things happening? Can you give us maybe an inside look?
A lot of trolling, a lot of like fake toxicity, everyone BMing each other and being bad at the roles, like getting solo diff to jungle diff to ADC diff, kind of just like trolling around mainly. But I was mainly, obviously we're still like, oh, we can win this fight if we fight this guy and this guy. Like, we're still trying, obviously, but it was a lot of trolling like in between.
Sure. Well, even though you guys were trolling a little bit and there was a bunch of role swaps, you guys do end up with the win. Speaking of which, you guys have basically had a lot of wins. I think really the only team in Phase 2 and maybe even Phase 1 that you guys struggled with has been Ghost. Can you talk about what Ghost does and maybe why they are hard for you guys to play into? Because I think I remember Raffer talked in an interview and he just said Ghost is just a team that we find very difficult. Can you expound on that a little bit?
It's just the way they play, like, kind of counters the way we play a little bit. Like, without going into too much detail, they are very like proactive early game, and we are a team that is like more proactive mid game. So like, if you give us like the first 2-3 items, and we have like way better chance at winning the game. And it goes does the like ramps up a little bit earlier. And when we're just not playing at 100%, we're not like ready for we're not reacting to what they're doing well enough. We'll just lose, obviously.
Yeah.
But so like, there's 2 ways to play against that, right? You either be the one that's proactive, or you just like be more aware and be smarter in the way you play the map. And we don't know which one we'll do. We'll see, I guess, next time we play them.
Sure. Do you feel, a lot of times on the casters and analysts, we talk about like Ghost being a quote unquote like early game team. Do you feel that is very much the case? I mean, like, I think from the picks that we see, they're not necessarily early game picks. Is it just sort of their play style that is, pressure out from minute zero?
Yeah, Ghosts are definitely not an early game. Like, they don't. I mean, sometimes they do. Like, they had a while where they would just pick full pressure. They have like Herc, Uller, and Arthur in solo, for example.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, that's full pressure, obviously. But like, they haven't really been playing full pressure all the time. Like a lot of games, like against us one time, they had Gibbons support. They had Fafnir before. They're both not very good. Like early game, they're fine.
Right.
They had Susano as well. He's not an early game jungler. So they just kind of pick. They pick normal. They just pick comps or whatever. They pick normal gods. But then the way they play is more like early game pressure. Like you don't have to pick early game pressure to play early game pressure. It makes it easier, obviously.
Yeah.
But they just like play around where they're strong early game, and if we like know stuff is coming, like sometimes you just know that they're gonna invade this blue or they're gonna gank this lane, but like we just don't react well enough to it, and we end up falling behind for it.
Yeah, I understand. Are these sort of like choreographed engagements? Are these maybe planned out before the game, or is this all just sort of in-game adaptation that you guys are doing?
It is mostly in game. Like maybe sometimes we'll talk about it. Like, okay, you should get this relic to counter this and do that, and like, oh, build this item so we can deal with this. But like in like mostly it's like 10 to 15 seconds before we start a fight, we know what the plan is. Like the plan is go on this guy, or like make sure to keep Dordis alive, or make sure to keep Vo alive. He's like going to carry this fight. Nick has owned this guy, kill this guy. Like it just depends on the team fight. But yeah, most of the time I'd say like 15 seconds before we start a fight, we've already planned out what is each person's job in the fight to make it more simple for everyone.
Right. Yeah, I sort of maybe imagined that, like, maybe this is me thinking too much into it, and that Smite is probably way more complex than this, but just like, because we see Obey now sort of focus on objectives and things like that, I kind of wondered if maybe there was the thought process of teams even before playing. They're like, oh, we want to get 15-minute golds, or we want to get the 12-minute gold, or does that come in at all in like your pre-planning before the sets?
Yeah, these are definitely nice strats some teams do with them before. Like some people just go into a game where like we are only doing objectives and disengaging. Like we're gonna get an objective and get out. We're gonna frenzy, secure, get out. We're gonna only camp solo for the first 10 minutes. Like pressure that side completely. We're gonna invade purples. Like we'll focus. Like sometimes you go into the game with like a certain plan in mind. But obviously sometimes stuff happens in the game that this plan changes. So like you're always gonna be able to adapt. Obviously, we don't do this as much. We don't go into a game with like one certain plan. We kind of just like adapt as it goes, which is why maybe we're not as proactive early game, because like everyone's just doing their own thing and reacting on their own. But yeah, like if we go into a game with like, okay, we're invading every purple, then we will obviously be more proactive because we have a certain plan in mind.
How often would you say that these game plans sort of like radically shift in the middle of a game? You're trying something for like the first maybe 10, 12, 15 minutes, and at that point you realize, hey, we got to switch it up to something completely different. Does that ever happen for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. Like I remember we had a game against like PK last phase or something, where the plan was to like completely shut down. Paul was playing Hell and was completely shut down Hell, and then level 2, me and Dordis both died. So obviously that plan is like, well, that is not going to work. You're not going to fight in mid when you're already both behind. Like it's not the best place to fight. So you have to like switch up the plan. Maybe like focus on farming. Maybe focus on ganking side lanes instead. Try to get a sneaky objective or something. Like obviously things change, but like you got to be able to adapt. Like it happens a lot where you just, like if something goes wrong in the game, like you're supposed to invade a blue, 2 of you die or something. Then okay, you're not invading blue anymore. You don't want to lose the game of that. So yeah, it happens sometimes.
Would you say those sorts of like adaptations and changes happen in every game?
If you're playing against a good team, it should. Like you should never execute a plan 100%, and the other team's just letting you get away with it for free. Like that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. One thing our analyst Frost likes to bring up a lot and has brought up in this phase in the past is that your team especially plays what he likes to call our meta adjacent picks, which is not necessarily the meta picks, but sort of like picks that both work well in your comp and for the players on your team for their style, but also are just sort of like just next to the meta and still do some things. I think like Hera is like the big example of this, where no one was really playing Hera before Dardes, and Dorta has played it so much and so well that Hera has sort of become meta in the SPL. Is that something that you sort of think about and have noticed at all with your team, especially?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I say the most two ones are like Hera and Erling. Like, they both weren't really picked at all.
Yeah.
Well, not at all, but they like Erling was like people just weren't playing him at all last phase in phase one. And I started playing, and then like slowly see like other players start playing him, and I was like, oh, this god's actually like not that bad. Same with Hera. I think Hera is like more obvious because like no one picked that god at all, and then Dodgers just kept playing it. So it's not like I guess it becomes meta because like teams know we play, so it's like our meta. I guess like
Right.
Hera, Erling, and Afro as well. No one really plays Afro except us, kind of same thing.
Yeah.
I would say we're doing it on purpose. Like we kind of just like we just think these gods are good. Other teams don't think the same as much. Like they don't think Hera is a top pick. Well, we kind of do for the way we want to play. So like it's not like oh well okay we need another non-meta god to pick so people like they're not playing it. So it's just like we think this god is good. We'll play it. People keep banning it because they think we're good with it, and we'll take it.
Sure. You mentioned playing Afro, which very few other teams do. And I remember when Zeros was on as an analyst, he had some thoughts about just trying to kill Raffer over and over again, or trying to ban out Raffer, because he feels that Raffer plays these peeling gods really well and helps keep picks like Hera and Afro and the carries for your team alive. Is that something that you guys feel could be a point of attack towards your team? Is teams looking to ban out Raffer to stop the peel?
I think it will definitely happen eventually. It hasn't been happening at all this phase.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen it this phase at all.
Yeah, people just really been ignoring Raffer and the last phase a little bit as well. But yeah, like Raffer is plays way better on the peeling gods when he gets to like stay with Broad and Daughters and kind of like gets to see the team fight from like a backline perspective. I'd say. Like he can still play like stuff like Kazambo, Sobek, and Xingchen or Horus or whatever. I mean, Horus is appealing up, but yeah, like he can still play the aggro gods, but he like we as a team do better when he's like playing at the back. Me and Nika playing in the front. Kind of how we play best. I think. Eventually, maybe if they feel like there's no point banning Daughters gods, they'll just ban Raffer gods. We'll see. We haven't really thought about it too much. But I think like Raffer has enough gods anyway, so it won't matter too much if they try to ban him out. If they end up banning like 3 of his gods, then me and Daughters get our picks, then we should be able to carry.
Sure. So I'm just gonna ask you sort of flat out, maybe not because I think you guys expect to win Worlds this year, but are there any other things that you think we might see in sort of the Worlds meta or in the game that comes through from these SPL players? Like, what are your expectations for the Worlds tournament in January?
I'm expecting one of like the lower end teams to kind of pop off. Like, I wouldn't really call United the lower end team, like because the players they have, like they're really like they could be a top team if they wanted to, but they're just not. Sure. Say United, Renegades, and Obey, like I could see one of them like popping off. Having a good run, having a good meta for like worlds qualifiers, popping off like PK, like SK did last year.
Sure.
So maybe that will happen. Who knows? I also am expecting like some cheesy starts, like 1 or 2 teams will have like a start that isn't the norm. Like jungler isn't starting on speed or support isn't starting on purple. They're doing something random somewhere else on the map. Because try to throw teams off. I'm expecting like random, like warriors blessing in mid, maybe stuff like that. Like I don't know. We'll see. Like. Try to not cheesy starts, but like off meta starts. I'm expecting that maybe 1 or 2 off meta picks as well from a couple of teams.
Sure. So now we're here at this part of the interview where I ask who you beefing with, who you trying to call out, who's into the scrims, and finally, of course, feel free to shout out anyone you want to shout out and say anything that you need to say. The soapbox is yours, Mr. Cherryo.
Well, everyone's ending scrims, that's for sure. Us and the enemy team, like, if I had to call out like specific people, I'd say Raffer, Daughters, Vo. Nika doesn't end scrims, but he tilts in scrims, which is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
He shuts down, gets to really emo. A little bit of that. He gets ganked, loses blue. It's not gonna be a good time for anyone.
Yeah.
Raffer and Daughters just don't know what's going in their head. I don't think anything it's just empty up there. They just like auto play, auto run. Like they don't know what they're doing. It's a struggle sometimes, but hopefully the closer we get to playoffs and worlds, the brain starts filling up and they saw like, oh, I remember how to think.
Yeah.
That's what I'm waiting for. That is what I'm waiting for.
Sure.
I don't really other teams like every team just has their troll players. We just have too many troll players. That's the difference. Like they have one, maybe two. We have two, maybe three sometimes.
Maybe
So
four,
we just
maybe five sometimes.
Yeah, like if my whole team is trolling, I'm like my mental is shattered. I'm just like running it down as well. Yeah, I think everyone kind of trolls and scrims a little bit, which is fine. But like when it starts when it's like becomes too often, then it kind of like starts affecting scrims a little bit.
Sure.
And I guess shout outs to SSG. They're definitely like the best org I've been a part of. In my I don't know how long I've played, like 5-6 years, something like that. Definitely the best org I've been part of. Like they take care of us. They always like if we ever want anything or need anything, they'll make sure it's there and they'll make sure we're playing our best. Shout out to my parents for letting me be here, and hopefully they let me come here next year again. I don't really know. I'm trying not to think about it and not stress about it too much. It's kind of like a thing where like I'll talk to them when I'm back. Instead of having to worry about it now and like affects my performance or anything.
Yep.
Shout out to my team, obviously. Like they're all idiots, but I really enjoy playing with them, and hopefully they stop trolling so we can maybe get a Worlds win.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Cherryo. I wish the best for you and your team in playoffs and qualifiers and Worlds, and even next season. I hope to see you in the SPL again because I love watching you play. So, thanks a lot for joining me, and best of luck to you guys. All right, let's move on to the next set of the week. Sanguine versus Obey. And I think, like most of the other games, this set did not have too much writing on the line here.
Luckily.
Bit of a stomp for the Sanguine boys. They said vamos on their way to playoffs here. Game 1, a little bit more calculated, but Game 2 was a bit of a bloodbath on both sides, with Sanguine ending up with 31 kills. In a pretty short game is what it looks like. Bobby got Yamoja here for the first time, I think, and since phase 1, if I recall correctly. So maybe this was just an experiment.
Maybe, but it just didn't look good, and this time it did.
Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway in the Yamoja for me was like Bobby's not picked it since phase 1, but this is the right sort of time to pull out that Yamoja again, right? They leave it up. You pick it because the games don't matter, and you try and have a good game on it or show you've improved to put more threat on other teams in the future. You know what I mean? You've got to really think about that threat thing of like, hey, has he got in his god pool? Well, he just picked it and he played pretty well, so we might need to be careful. I mean, some gods take a while for different players to be able to utilize or use very well. Not every pro player picks up every god at the same rate, in my opinion. I think it's very much about play style orientated, and Bobby's an aggressive player, and I think even his Yamoja play, which it's a hard one to try and master in your brain when you're what kind of support play you're going to play with Yamoja, because she's got aggressive zones and then defensive and then utility zones. It's different stages of the game for her too, so it does take a lot more to master, and he definitely did look better on it, that's for sure.
That's what it was, wasn't it? Jake and Bobby. Was it? Did Jake play one?
I believe Jake played one in the next set.
Yeah, Jake
and I remarked on while I was watching it, it's like, oh, he's got a Yamoja. After I think Mifflin said he never wants to see Bobby on Yamoja ever again.
I think he had to play it though, just to at least put that little seed of doubt in other teams' minds that maybe we just can't give it to, because Yamoja is pretty much like permaban versus the top teams, I think.
Exactly, and I think if I'm honest, that's the level when a god is top pick, top ban for whatever reason, right? It has to be in a god pool. It has to be someone on the team that can pilot that god specifically, because you can't leave yourself open to be vulnerable to something like that, because you will get abused with it. It means that teams don't have to ban Yamoja themselves, which means you've got to force a ban on Yamoja. And what if you're first pick and not second pick? You don't want to use a Yamoja ban there, do you? You've got other priority targets you're scared of the double pick against. So it's definitely a tricky task for every pro player to understand every god, but when the meta changes, they've got to pick up the pace, and that's a prime example, in my opinion, of Bobby and 408 picking it up too, Jake, just to really show that they do have it in the god pool and continuing to grind at their job for the most part and get better at the whole big picture thing.
It really was a sort of coming of age pick for Bobby here, but how much respect did Sanguine really have for it, seeing as they picked Nike into the only character that really just kind of says shields don't exist?
I mean, we don't even need gods for that. You've got Sunder these days. Like, I think Sunder's really slapped on against Nike. Funny enough, I don't know why more teams haven't just done that just to remove her from the game. But her viability, I think, is still pretty potent anyway.
They don't like her because you can go full cooldown and you outpace the Sunder.
Yeah,
essentially. That's like the only nitpicky thing. I still love it. Get 2 Sunders at that point.
And if that's the nitpicky thing of like she can go full cooldown, well, you're forcing her to go full cooldown, right? Just to get that shield up all the time.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, if you can burn through the shield once and kill her, that's what you wanted to do anyway at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, sure, just wait for the relic cooldown again. Yeah, Sunder's OP these days. I don't know why. I don't know why it keeps getting buffed in different ways.
It needs to execute, and then they'll be done with it. But
oh god.
Also, yeah, this because these matches don't really count for seeding. I think it does have to do more with a bit of a mind game. Sanguine's here going, Wolfie, you're not the only one with a Raw.
Well, Wolfie said, Twig, you're not the only one with an Anubis game, too. And it didn't turn out super great for him. Any final thoughts on this Obey set? Obey versus Sanguine set before we do move on to the Sunday Fun Day sets, as we're just joking
really
about here?
good.
Yeah, Shinto is very good.
Shinto is great. Honestly, I want to say it real quick, because like the Sanguine boys, like, what a year they've had, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in fairness, when they came into the league, and even like the Sanguine account on Twitter tweeted it straight after the weekend, going, "Hey, the casters, like said, would be lucky to get 6." And realistically, when you look at the league and you look at what they were up against this year, 6 was a really good place for them to be if they could get that far. Ending 3rd in Phase 2 and having such a good run in Phase 1, I was concerned after Phase 1 because Phase 1 went so well for them. The problem was they got a target on their back for a second, and it made teams really dial in and study them and learn where they're strong and weak. So Phase 2, I was concerned of Sanguine falling further down the standings more than anything else because teams work them out and work out where their weaknesses and strengths were. But I think they've done a really good job of holding their own and still being creative. This is a team that, for my liking, that LATAM team could have gone pro years ago at one point in time. So it's good to see them get a shot through Sanguine and Cakeman and really put it to good use. Like, nobody's making meme jokes about Sanguine anymore. These LATAM boys are slapping kids. It's great.
Yeah,
Well,
I
they
know.
really put that low.
Yeah, I know when I interviewed Shinto last week, he said they basically expected 6th place. And they were pretty much just as surprised that they were winning all these games and were able to get 1st place in the first phase. So
yeah.
I think, and obviously that first phase must have been a huge confidence boost for them, just to say, like, you know, hey, we're here and we actually can compete, and, you know, we're right there at the same level as a lot of these teams.
Sure. I mean, it's also been a crazy year too, with obviously with the coronavirus and everybody working from home and the pandemic. It definitely put some question marks in my head personally, because obviously I've been around the scene a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So Sanguine, in theory, all they really did was move to America and sit in a house and video game online, right?
Yep.
Which is very much what they were doing from LATAM anyway. They didn't go into the studio, they didn't have all the LAN games, and that for me is an interesting factor going into potentially next year of like, let's all hope everything clears up, right? But if we go back to studio and we're all back and everyone's going well, how do they go into the LAN every single day? Do they start to falter now because they're having to play in a different setup in a different area? Sure, their home would moved, but it's different being at LAN versus being in the comfort of your own apartment or place, you know. And I think that was a benefit to Sanguine this phase and this year, but I'm excited to see how that goes next year, because I think some teams have suffered because of that this year for sure.
All right, let's move on to Sunday Fun Day, as I had mentioned, with PK versus RNG, and Hindu was just waxing poetic a little bit ago about how many kills were in this game, and how there were too many for him. And was it you and Agro on the cast?
Yeah, Agro knew this was going to be bad for some reason. Excuse me, and tweeted out like, "I'm going to troll Hindu," and I'm like, "Why are you going to troll me for? It's not my fault this is going on." I have no idea why I put myself on that cast, but I guess it was just my, good service, and I was owed one by the Smite gods to have to do a really stupid set like that. It was fun. Let's be honest. The players had fun with it. They were kind of being very loose and aggressive, overly so was the casting. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think everyone knew it was sort of a fun match, especially when Neil locks in the tier support and things like that. And Zap going 1-11 on Cupid.
You can see it in their faces, man. Like the jokes that you were making about, like, oh, Bear is frowning for the first time. I mean, I was losing it in my seat watching that.
Yeah, so the tweet, just so you guys know, if you didn't get to catch this one, game 1, 13 minutes and 18 seconds, Renegades had died 14 times, and Pittsburgh Knights had died 14 times. Pittsburgh Knights had 2 towers down, and were down only 400 gold. That's the game. That's the state of affairs at 30 minutes in. And by that point, me and Ryan have gone, yeah, I'm not casting all these silly fights that are going on because they're just having fun. So let's just be loose too. It's always nice when we get some loose games though. Like I don't think we get chance in the regular season enough to really have some fun with the pros.
Sure.
And let them do an all-star event and stuff like that sometimes. Like let them, hang loose and have a bit of fun. Because it really shows just how good these guys can be when they're playing just chilly and try to do a cool play rather than play to win, which is what happens in the Pro League. You can really get to see some like extra cool abilities and like little nuanced plays that can come out, and that's always the fun stuff.
I'm just waiting for someone to do the Susano Heroin tick. That needs to happen.
God, in the mid lane, not again. While it was very lighthearted, there was also a bit of a shadow overcast from this. In a way, Knights kind of said, we could throw a game to you and still beat you. And you could definitely see in the cams, maybe it's just because of daylight savings time, and the day was getting darker, but especially on Variety, it's as if the man was getting smaller and smaller in his seat. He's getting rather upset.
Like, not with it or something. It's like, my whole team's having fun, but can I go eat dinner now? Like, I genuinely...
I mean, it was game 3. He was playing Sobek, right? Like, how much fun are you going to have on Sobek? Game 2, what was it? What did it end up going in game 2? He went 1-8 in game 2.
He went Guan.
Yeah, but he had fun on Guam. That's the difference, right?
It's true.
How much fun on solo Sobek can you really have?
Especially with your.
That's kind of his pick too. He likes to play that.
Well,
Does he?
especially,
I guess.
especially when your Neja support is going all Into mode here, 2-11 for Jake. So
You're also against Amaterasu in lane, so you ain't killing no one.
yeah, just
So. The glory.
With no damage on the ground aside from, I guess, a Kabrakan. Yeah, that Naja is not dropping anyone into damage.
It was a bit of a weird draft in game 3. Let's just leave it at that. Is there anything meaningful we can maybe glean from these games? I know there's a lot of fun and things like that, but is there anything that
take away?
that you can take away or that points to what we can see in playoffs or qualifiers or worlds?
I think the biggest thing it really is to just give credit to for Renegades, I should say, of like kind of bouncing back a little bit. The split, like they were struggling just like a United were, and I think a lot of people had touted United to rise in standings with the adjustments they made. Baskin coming on the team, Snoopy back to ADC, but I just don't think they had enough time in the oven, honestly, to really get themselves up to speed. I think the biggest thing for me was Baskin still needed working solo, and like it's not that he's a bad player, it's not that he could like potentially be one of the greatest in that role again, it's just he's been so long out of being out of that lane that I think it took him a little bit of time to adjust, and he's still getting there. If they would have put him mid, potentially they could have just hit the ground running, but then they would have had knock-ons elsewhere on the team. So I think the biggest thing was, from Renegade's point of view, to stay and slowly improve throughout the year, especially with their roster changes too, because they lost Solo or Troll. And I think since it's been interesting to see, like, have they done better? Have they not? And I still think that's a question that a lot of people still have, especially the Solo or Troll fans, of whether that was a good trade for them.
Yeah. Ross, Lermy, any thoughts on what we can take away from this set at all?
Assassin supports can stay on the shelf.
Assassin supports are fine. It's Naja if you got no damage on the ground.
I mean,
I don't know what you
he's the
expect.
worst character in the game. Do we believe that?
I know plays Osiris jungle.
Are you all
Okay,
ready for
fair.
The last set of the week was SSG versus United, a really spicy one from the Space Station boys here. They role swapped everything. I think Nico was ADC, Dardes went back to his support roots, right? Raffer had to play mid because
That's the only role left.
that's the only role left. We saw Cherryo in the solo lane, and we saw Vote in the jungle. And Vote actually looked pretty good. I think he carried on Alquag.
Vote loves jungle. He loves Akwang. That's all he does in ranked. It's just jungle.
10-0.
Yeah, he did.
So.
He did kind of pop off on that Al Kwong, I'll be honest. It's definitely another threat now. But the funny thing is the community now all going, shouldn't Vote just play this in the ADC role, man? Like, what do you think? Should he just, like, pick this up? I mean, we see Set in ADC for Cyclone. Can't Vote just do the same thing and pop off now? And I'm like, yeah, but no. What are you going to put him with to help him clear in that early game? Like, no, you're not going to have a fun time there.
It's not fun.
Sylvanas.
God, no.
I don't think that would be even enough because when Sylvanas is there clearing, they're just going to kill Sylvanas.
Yeah,
and laugh. What's Al Kwong going to do to stop them killing the Sylvanas, you know?
Yeah, they definitely lean heavily into the Sunday Funday vibe. I think with Cherryo picking Alposh solo in game 2 and literally
shouts to Cherryo for that
over and over and over again. So
I appreciate the SPL players as well, just making a whole agreement that nobody likes Alposh. So when he does get in a game, they will just murder him to remind them not to pick this god. And it's a rule that everyone's okay with, you know? Even SSG were okay with it because they didn't help him out in that lane at all.
True.
They just left him and went, that's Alposh.
Yeah.
That's what happens to him. Yeah. No, I think it was also like for their mental health. You've got poor Nika doesn't even want to play Amaterasu anymore. You've got to give him something a little different, something to de-stress before he's got to go back in and play Amaterasu again for playoffs and Worlds.
Yeah, so give him the ROM and the Jingweis and, you know, those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, it's definitely always. I love the final game. Sometimes can be the most fun for me because they're so serious through the year. These players, letting them be able to get loose and just have a bit of fun when there's nothing riding on it is really important to me. I think the worst thing is when one team doesn't have anything to play for and one does, because one's trolling and one's tryharding, and it's like, oh, this is kind of awkward now, especially if the trollers are still winning when the other team's tryharding, and you're like, oh no, please don't do this to them. It's embarrassing. But yeah, I think it was a good example of two different teams with two different mindsets, funny enough, because I think Unite kind of adopted to the style that SSG went for and kind of went with the fun. But at the start, I think you saw Unite really trying hard to improve because they've still got work to do, you know? Right. So it made sense to me to see this set be a bit weird at the start and then progressively get worse as the series went on.
Sure. I don't really have too many notes about this set other than because, you know, again, like the last set, how much can you really glean from these sets where people are role swapping and things like that, you know?
But here's what you can glean, right? If the whole roster of Space Station Gaming had to rosters change within themselves, this is where they'd probably end up, I think, is what we're talking about here. So.
I think we knew this before. I'm pretty sure Aggro asked either Cherry or Vote or maybe both of them about this. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure they had a big discussion about who would play what role. Yeah, I remember that. I would like to see Rafa back in the jungle again. It's been too long. I'm just saying. I just want to see him again from the old days.
He basically plays jungle with the way he plays support anyhow.
Listen, when he first became a support player, like I remember a Thanatos start that he did once, and we only saw that once, thank God. But that didn't work out so well.
I want them to keep doing that. They're just not brazen enough for it. I don't know. In the end, though, someone did have to win out of all these sets, even if they were basically exhibition matches.
Yeah,
I think that's as much information as you're going to get. Is and I think a bit of foreshadow.
The long-term viewers and the ones who know the scene well and has been around a bit probably enjoy those more than the casuals that are looking to pick something up because they're like, why are these guys messing around and they're getting paid to do this? And it's like, no, we see these guys go hard at it time in and time out. This is them like kind of letting loose for a second, and you can have a lot more fun with it by just being that way. So,
well, now that we're done with the regular season for Phase 2, I think it's time maybe we just run through really quickly what people's power rankings are. There's probably going to be like a pretty distinct top 5, I imagine, and a pretty distinct top 3 as well. So maybe we'll just have sort of an open discussion. Is Ghost sort of your guys' number 1? Maybe is that a consensus?
I'll go last because I have a very odd method brackets. I don't know.
Sure. You want to start us off here, Lermy? What is your sort of ranking looking like?
It's tough to say because Ghosts definitely have been performing at the top pretty consistently throughout the year, and of course they have had their troll moments where they slip up a little bit here and there, but it's very close for me between Ghosts and SSG. I genuinely think that this is when SSG has absolutely just been knocking it out of the park in basically every set. And it's going to be all about, you know, whatever this world's meta ends up turning into. So whatever they adapt to, I could maybe even see them taking the top. And it's very hard for me to pick honestly. But if we're talking about right here, right now, I'm going to say Ghost. If we're going, a patch or two down the line when it's Worlds time, I might say SSG.
What about you want to just quickly give us like your ranking 1 through 10?
Right now we've got
eight. There's not 10.
Oh, 8.
10.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Last 10 Dignitas and Paradigm right at the bottom.
My bad. 1 through 8.
We've got Ghost 1, SSG 2, Radiance 3, Sanguine 4, Knights 5, Renegades 6, E United 7, Obey 8.
How about for you guys, Hindu Frost? Is that where you guys are generally aligning?
It's pretty similar. I mean, honestly, through the year, I had a big belief that there was a top 4, bottom 4. And there is. It's funny enough, it's gone the same way in the standings as is right now going into playoffs. At the start of the year, I was like, that's the top 4, that's the bottom 4, clear as day. But I will say that, like, throughout the year, that they kind of molded brackets almost, you know what I mean, of like whether it was a top 4, bottom 4. It kind of went for a little while into a 3-3-2, you know what I mean, in terms of a split breakdown for these teams.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'll be honest, I think we're in more of a 2-4-2 situation where top 2 are definitely Ghost and Space Station for me. I think that will really come down to Worlds on the day. If those guys face off against each other, who's going to have it? If they even meet each other, because last time they were due to meet, PK turned up and destroyed everyone, or SK back then. But I think Ghost and Space Station are in the top 2. I then think you fall into the 4 group bracket, and I'm putting Renegades in there because I think Renegades are part of that 4 group now that could take games. But I think it's going to be tricky for them. Sanguine, Radiance, PK. I am edging at the moment Radiance over Sanguine, heading into playoffs and heading towards Worlds a little bit more. And then PK and Renegades after that. I think PK will do well if they can just get a good weekend like they did at Worlds last year, if I'm honest. I think Radiance has the ability to play off momentum. However, one bad loss and that could go downhill real quick, it feels like to me. So for my money, it's Ghost of Space Station top 2, Radiant Sanguine, PK Renegades, and then E United Obey. So close-ish to what Lermy's saying, really.
I think that's exactly what Lermy had as well.
I just don't hard lock a team. That's the difference because I'm so used to this at this point. Like Space Station goes any given day, dude. Any given day, those dudes. I would like to see them play a marathon across 4 days, right?
Like a good old-fashioned test cricket match. All right, Frost. You said you had a hot take here about power ranking, so I'll open it up to you. What's your take on where the teams stand?
I've got these weird ones, and oddly enough, it's not changed that much since the start because I did do those SPL videos, so I obviously had to rank them then and then sort of kind of update as we went along. But it comes down to it, and yes, fanboy, but also like I've been watching the SPL for 7 some years, and I just not got it down to a science because I just can't deal with the numbers and all that. But it's gonna go Ghost in the number 1, just locked there because I don't think SSG can handle them. Radiance have shown that they do have that slight ability to be able to take them on, but I think they're just closer to SSG skill wise. So those are going to be Ghost at the top, number 1, but then 2 and 3 are going to be SSG and Radiance interchangeably. Then I've got Sanguine PK interchangeably. PK, I think, though, is a little bit stronger, has a little more of a solid mentality of how they want to play the game. Sanguine is a kind of, we take the game as it comes to us. We think 2 moves ahead, whereas I feel like PK really have their entire plan plotted out for the entire match. Then from there, you've got just the Renegade boys, United Obey. I think I will leave them as the standings go with Renegades, United, and Obey. And it's kind of unfortunate. You said bottom 4, top 4 is how you had it initially, Hindu. To me, it's going to be Sanguine's the cutoff. Sanguine is how you play in the SPL. Maybe this is kind of harsh. This is the epitome of a bottom seed team. And we've got 3 outliers that kind of, for unfortunate circumstances or for their just roster changes or Corona, anything, just shouldn't have cut it. I'm going to be, I guess, like Simon and America's Got Talent or whatever it is. Those three to me just would not have been here. They could try again next year once they've got it all sorted out. But Sanguine is well deserved, should be here, but also bottom of those standings. And Renegades United Obey, they kind of got to figure themselves out. They're going to have a really rough time with the playoffs.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that as well for us. Because, like, honestly, when I said the top four, bottom four at the start of the year, I would have classed Sanguine as being part of the bottom four, alongside Obey, alongside E United, and alongside Renegades. I think PK, Ghost, SSG, and Radiance were definitely my top four heading into the year. Where I'm like, this is going to be the top four, in my opinion. But then the season plays out, you know, and then roster changes happen. United Obey struggle. I think Renegades have struggled with roster changes too. Those three teams alone, like, you can see that the fact that they've had so many roster changes or changes to their squads shows that they're trying to make a difference. They realize they're going down the wrong path, right? And I think a lot of people had views of those teams coming into the start of the year, but all three of them have made strides to try and improve, just not maybe at the rate that everybody wanted them to. And so that's why they find themselves in the bottom three. And I think Sanguine's always going to be solid, but I always wonder what happens with Sanguine if they want to replace a member ever. Do they ever need to replace a member? And if they do, are they going to go to the LATAM pool, or are they going to go elsewhere? I'm excited about seeing that, honestly, if that ever does happen.
Sure. Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown this week. Be sure to be on the lookout for our next episode, which will probably air after the Phase 2 playoffs. As always, if you have any ideas for future guests, either guest analysts or player interviews that you want me to do, feel free to DM me on Twitter at Apam2 or at Apam Productions. And extended cuts of my discussions with these analysts and my interviews with pro players are always available on the Apam Productions YouTube. So be sure to check those out. Thanks for watching, and see you guys soon.